This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is the show for December 10th, 2019, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, cuboids?
Cristina Roach.
Hey everyone.
And producer Pat.
Hey, checkers.
We have a great show for you today. Cristina is going to look into whether you could survive the booby traps from the movie Home Alone. And then Adam is going to give us a book review, talking about the consequences of urban violence. But first, I'm going to talk to you about vortices in Arizona. I just returned from a lovely week in Arizona, and one can't visit Sedona without being aware of vortices and their seekers. Vortexes may be what is more commonly used, but vortices is more grammatically correct, and it's more fun to say, so I'm going to use that form of the plural.
Nice.
What is a vortex? A vortex is a region in a fluid in which the flow revolves around an axis line, which may be straight or curved. Well, that's the fluid dynamics definition I took from Wikipedia.
Okay.
But what is a vortex in Sedona? Wikipedia has a long list of disambiguation entries, and Sedona is actually on the list, but I'm going to quote from the Sedona's Visitor Center handout, linked on the Visit Sedona webpage put out by the Chamber of Commerce, which you can find in our show notes at trcpodcast.com. Vortexes are enhanced energy sites that facilitate prayer, meditation, mind-body healing, and creative thinking.
Whoa.
The vortexes are not, all caps for the not, electric or magnetic. These labels are meant symbolically. Now that's an interesting series of phrases.
Yeah.
Enhanced energy, but not electrical or magnetic. But those are only symbolic, but not the whole thing is symbolic in terms of language.
Wow.
I'm guessing your skeptical senses are already tingling, or they have already activated your BS detector. But wait, there's more. Full quotes here because I feel that's the easiest way to capture it all. There's upflow areas, which are also called masculine or electric, and that's Bell Rock and Airport Mesa. These are locations. These sites help you with reflections while soaring to a higher perspective.
Oh my God.
Is what you want. Feeling one with the universe or your faith's view of the infinite. Answers to problems from an expanded, outside-the-box point of view, stress reduction, and lowering blood pressure. Now there's also inflow areas, also called feminine or magnetic, and this would be Red Rock Crossing or Los Obrigados Creekside. These sites help you go inward for introspective prayer and meditation. They are also particularly useful for healing scars from the past. The flowing water at these sites help you release old hurts and nurture new growth. Well, why go for one or the other when you can have combination sites, also called electromagnetic, like Cathedral Rock and West Fork Trail. I did go to Cathedral Rock. It was beautiful. These sites have multiple energies that allow you to do more advanced spiritual and mind-body skills. Let me keep going. More detailed, specific information is available in the Scientific Vortex Information Book, or DVD, available in all Sedona bookstores, which is where all the information came from.
Which direction does the DVD spin?
Yeah, there you go. Also on that website, quoting from author Roger Naylor, yet even if you have no particular interest in the metaphysical movement, plan on visiting Sedona's Vortex sites. It is virtually guaranteed that you will leave feeling better than when you arrived. Your heart will be lighter, your smile will be wider, and you will feel more energized. Because here's the wonderful secret. Vortexes are located at some of the most devastatingly scenic spots found among the towering red rock formations. Anytime you can get outside to walk in sunshine, breathing fresh, clean air amid dazzling panoramas is a day well spent.
So what you're saying is these are beautiful places to visit.
Right. Sedona is beautiful. Amazingly beautiful. Brian Dunning and Skeptoid back in 2013, here's a quote, "As our brain always does in every situation, it references its experiential database to explain its perceptions in terms it's familiar with. Sedona's beauty is such that many people can only compare it to a powerful spiritual experience. To visit Sedona, you either have to recalibrate your sense of awe, or your brain interprets the experience as literally supernatural.
Interesting.
If you're inclined to believe in the supernatural, then it's normal and expected for human psychology to determine that a higher power is in effect in Sedona."
What you're saying is it's a beautiful place to visit.
Yes, Patrick. The concept of the energy vortex is, for whatever reason, the popular explanation that took the strongest hold there, and the magnitude of the experience of Sedona is palpable, even though many of us tend to accept the vortex explanation as plausible. The feeling is strong, thus the evidence seems to support the suggested explanation. End quote from Brian Dunning.
Yeah.
It really was a beautiful place. There's a city of 10,000 people that has 3 million tourists each year.
Wow.
Hiking on level easy in the sense that, yes, some are moderate and easy, but it's a 15-minute drive to get to a hike. It already looks great before you start. It looks great while you walk up. It looks great while you walk down it. It's amazing. It really is one of the most beautiful places I've been. Imagine I had a religious experience. I came back like, actually, I really felt strong energy there. Yeah. So in a way, there's nothing new here in terms of new agey language. And in the visitor center, people are not promoting vortices and all that sort of thing, but you can find them on most maps. Yeah. There's a little legend which says this is a vortex site and this is another site. And then there's a wall of pamphlets, whether you want to do some like sort of off-road hiking or you want to check out different restaurants. And there's a section which has about maybe 40 of them, which has metaphysical, new agey businesses. Sedona has become a bit of a place that draws people towards this.
Yeah. So who's profiting from this?
Well, you are if you have an open mind, Cristina.
Right.
Well, the vortices in Sedona, no one, unless Sedona tourism gets money just from people coming to see a vortex.
Yeah.
But I think it's more of a secondary reason for people to go to Sedona. But of course, for some people, it might be their primary reason.
Got it. Okay. So it's not like someone is selling a tour and doing that type of thing and claiming that these vortices can do these things and yeah. And
so I'm pretty sure there is someone that is doing that.
Yeah.
But I did not experience that directly. But
Gotcha.
you know, you can experience something like that probably in Ottawa or almost any other city where someone's going to give you some tour of new agey things one way or another.
Yeah. Ghost walks or whatever. Right?
Exactly.
Did you find in your travels, did you see people who were just like sitting in some of these spots meditating or really sort of looking like they were captivated by the idea and buying right into it?
That would have been better for research. Number one, going in December, there just weren't as many people on the trails.
Okay.
Often we're kind of like hiking alone. You might run into a couple of people along the way, but not really. And then because I was so put off with the idea of vortices, because my mind was so closed, you see, yes. I did not strictly pay attention to when I might come across one.
Yeah.
And if I did, I didn't really see anyone doing anything enlightening at that moment. So I don't have any on the ground data to report back to you.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Like many New Age ideas, there's a heart of truth in there, which is about appreciating something, connecting with yourself, connecting with nature, being open-minded. All of these things are fantastic. If you happen to go to Sedona and you feel better from believing in a vortex, that can bring you some value. But at the moment, there's no evidence whatsoever for these types of things bringing extra experiences to the human being beyond what is obviously available from nice, clean nature, air, hiking, friends, company, vacation, and beautiful scenery. And now we turn to Cristina, who will tell us about a simpler time when child abandonment was funny.
When it was en vogue. The festive season is upon us, and you know what that means, checkers. The yearly tradition of getting cozy and watching the Christmas classic Home Alone starring a fresh-faced Macaulay Culkin. For those of you who are not familiar with the movie, it's a comedy about 8-year-old Kevin, whose family accidentally leaves him behind in the chaos of getting to the airport on time for their Christmas vacation in France. No cell phones in 1990, guys. At first, he's pretty excited to have the house to himself until burglars who have been vandalizing the neighborhood try to break in. The most well-known scenes in the film consist of Kevin setting up a bunch of booby traps to dissuade Harry and Marv, aka the Wet Bandits, aka not the brightest bulbs on the Christmas tree. The traps include heating an interior doorknob until it's red hot in an effort to burn the burglar's hand when he turns the exterior knob to break in. So the thinking is the heat would go from the indoor knob to the outdoor knob. There's blowtorching traps, swinging paint cans down a flight of stairs to knock them out. Each scene is comically played out like a Coyote Roadrunner cartoon. And obviously we're all rooting for the kid here, but you can't help but think how silly it all is, how dumb these burglars are, and that's really the point.
To be fair, Joe Pesci does a lot of bad things in those Scorsese movies, so he kind of deserved it.
Karma.
Yeah.
Now, Darren posted in our group chat a very fun video from the good people at Vsauce circa 2016 called The Devastating Real-Life Effects of Home Alone's Booby Traps. I'd never seen it, but often contemplated some of the things they cover, and Vsauce does a great job of citing a bunch of links to studies and medical info underneath the video if you want to do a deeper dive. Now, in the video, Jake Roper uses science to break down some of the repercussions of the traps, along with another scene where one of the burglars takes a crowbar to the other's chest in an attempt to kill a tarantula. So more about that later. Now, in the movie, the burglars kind of shake the paint off and they come back for more, but in real life, could they? Now, first, Vsauce does a really cool job of recreating the inside of the house, and with the help of a ballistic dummy, set out to test the hot doorknob and paint can to the face traps. Now, in the film, Kevin hangs an electric barbecue lighter on the interior doorknob, which in turn heats the brass knob so much it turns red and transfers heat to the outdoor knob, burning Harry. As Roper points out right off the bat, the door is made of metal, but the interior is wood and foam. In order to get the knob to glow like in the movie, it would have to be heated to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 538 degrees Celsius.
More than 451 degrees or so. Is this what we're thinking?
If that happened, the metal would start to warp and the wood and foam would combust in flames. Now, after heating the knob for 30 minutes, in the movie it took like a minute, the knob only gets to 900 degrees Fahrenheit, 482 degrees Celsius on the inside. But interestingly, the outdoor knob is only 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius.
Doors are supposed to be pretty good at like keeping heat and cold out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you really could carry the heat or cold exchange from one knob to another on a cold day, you would always freeze your hand when opening your door to leave your house, for example. And that doesn't happen, right? So...
Way to connect it to lived experience, bro.
So they take a blowtorch to the interior doorknob at this point to speed things up. And the exterior knob only ever got up to 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 46 degrees Celsius in their test. Now, the interior knob got up to a red hot 1400 degrees Fahrenheit, 760 degrees Celsius, enough to cause severe burns, which they even tested with pork belly to mimic human flesh. And as Roper predicted, the inside of the door caught on fire, rendering the trap kind of useless. Now, mechanical engineer Mark Robert joins in to discuss the physics of a paint can to the face. I found this fascinating. A paint can weigh around 13 pounds, 5.9 kilograms. As he nicely sums up in the video, quote, "They drop this from the top of the stairs when the bandits are about halfway up. That means as the can falls, it picks up speed as the gravitational potential energy is converted to kinetic." So the math says about 17 miles per hour, and he adds that if you give the can a bit of a push, it's coming at you at like 20 miles per hour with a possible impact force of 12 kilonewtons. So for context, that is 6 times more than the force needed to break your nose.
Wow.
You take that force, divide it by the mass of your head, and he calculates that your head snaps back at 266 Gs, meaning, quote,
wow,
a 100% chance you would get knocked out, a 42% chance your skull would actually crack.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah. So Vsauce tested the trap on the ballistic dummy, and it was pretty obvious you'd be flattened after this kind of blow to the head, and the dummy's head actually almost came clear off. Actually, it was a really cool scene in the video because they slowed it down and they had, you know, this really beautiful classical music. It looked almost like a ballet playing out.
Nice.
Now, what about swinging a crowbar at someone's chest? Now, color me skeptical, but that sounds devastating. Now, as Jake Roper says, a crowbar weighs about 5 pounds, 2.26 kilograms. It's likely swinging at 35 miles per hour through the air, delivering a total force of 15,000 newtons. That's 4.5 times the amount of force needed to break your rib.
Wow.
The impact broke 7 ribs and punctured the dummy's lungs and heart. Vice Magazine's Kevin Wong did a great take featuring a motherboard interview with a New York City EMT named Joseph O'Hare, asking his professional 2 cents on whether one could survive Kevin's booby traps. Now, his take on the paint can to the face is, quote, "Teeth would be flying, their noses would be broken, multiple fractures would probably occur from the impact and the resulting fall. The trauma could possibly create a brain bleed, and a subsequent hemorrhagic stroke could lead to death." Boy. As for the scene where Kevin MacGyvers a blowtorch in a doorway, which subsequently fries the top of Harry's head, O'Hare says, quote, he's looking at possible second or third degree burns. A burn of this nature has the potential to damage underneath the dermis and affect deeper tissue. One would expect to see deeply blackened skin with severe blistering or even some exposed bone in the area. Placing his head in the snow was a smart move, but depending on how badly he was affected, his body might have gone into shock before he had a chance to do that. And of course, as you know, he just kind of gets up and he's like, he's bald now, and the top of his head is smoking. So I hate to be a party pooper, but the likelihood of the Wet Bandits surviving the damage inflicted by a young Kevin in the film is pretty much nil. But that shouldn't take the fun of watching it away. If anything, you can feel a little more vested knowing some of the actual science behind that movie magic.
And if domestic violence wasn't enough, we now turn to a broader sociological picture with crime, and Adam giving us a book review.
That's right. I recently read an interesting book by Thomas Abt titled Bleeding Out, The Devastating Consequences of Urban Violence and a Bold New Plan for Peace in the Streets. It deals specifically with the issue of urban violence and did so with an evidence-based approach, which I liked and thought that our listeners might appreciate too. Now, a bit of a disclaimer, I don't like to speak about where I work on the show, but I understand that some listeners who know me, and maybe some who don't, do know where that is. I work in IT, but this work does relate to law enforcement. I don't work on law enforcement policy, and the things this book discusses don't have anything to do with my work. This segment is about my personal feelings on a book, which I found interesting. They're not a reflection of my employer in any way, just something I liked. Further, as a Canadian, the challenges that this book addresses aren't really necessarily relevant to things going on here. The US has a particular problem with urban violence that Canada doesn't have. Though there are a few urban areas in Canada which may have similar challenges, likely in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, those weren't places studied by the author. Though many Canadians are influenced by the events they see in the US media, and they might sometimes project some of these issues onto Canada, it doesn't always fit. There may be similarities, but it's not the exact same thing. This is a book about US urban violence and potential solutions to it. Prior to reading this book, I didn't have a ton of thoughts as to why there was an urban violence problem in the U.S., but I kind of understood that there was in the U.S. as kind of an outlier when it comes to violence in a lot of ways. So I'm a fan of Steven Pinker's works, and he touches on these issues in his discussions on violence reduction in books like The Better Angels of Our Nature and Enlightenment Now. Now, he presents an idea in which crime is higher in areas where there is less trust in the police, and violence is lower when people feel that the police protect them. Over time, this generally means people are having more confidence in government and police, and there's more of a government monopoly on violence sort of as we go forward, which is why we have these trends of violence reduction. So this kind of way of thinking generally jives with the idea that better policing in a community suffering from violence ultimately protects the innocent citizens in those communities, in turn reduces violence. But Pinker doesn't really focus on urban violence, it's just one of the many things he talks about, but this book is really focused on this one issue. So to be clear, this book is specifically about urban violence, and the way the author describes this is violence in cities, in public places, so often in places like the street. Now, this is a significant problem in the U.S., which Thomas Abt uses numbers to illustrate. He even puts a monetary value to homicides, stating that those which are the result of urban violence cost society somewhere between $10 and $20 million per killing, so per murder.
Wait a second, what? 10 to 20 million?
Yeah. So
you're going to say more, or should I react?
Yeah, I'll know. Yeah, you can be shocked by it. I was shocked by it too.
That seems really high. I'm curious to hear more.
Yeah, so he basically gives those the 10 million is sort of the conservative estimate, and there's some higher estimates. He says basically this can affect Americans through taxes, higher insurance rates, reduced property values, lost work, and more issues. He uses this to illustrate how little the cost to reduce urban violence would be when you consider the savings when you save some lives, even a small number of lives. He also says this to show that it doesn't just cost people in those affected communities. So if obviously it's having an impact on property value or taxes or other insurance issues for all Americans, maybe in a city or maybe in a state, maybe in the whole country. Now, to be clear, the communities most affected by urban violence are often poor communities, primarily populated by Black and Latino people. This is something he keeps coming back to throughout the book. Now, a main recurring idea is that it's violence itself that is the problem that needs to be tackled rather than proximate causes. A lot of people view targeting poverty, for example, as a way to reduce violence. And he believes that poverty is an important thing to target, but for the sake of reducing violence, targeting violence is the best approach. And quite the opposite, he claims and supports through some evidence that violence reduction would actually reduce poverty. So if you want to reduce violence, reducing poverty is sort of an other way to do it, but targeting the violence will reduce the violence. It will also have the side effect of reducing the poverty, which is great. And this is really a research and evidence-based book. It's the kind of stuff I like. And the author uses a lot of evidence of what works and what doesn't to inform the suggestions that he's making. It's not all about throwing police at the problem, but involves a lot of approaches to avoid having people become violent offenders earlier in their lives. For example, having programs which work with children in affected areas who are at risk to avoid further problems. So trauma is a common issue in the backstory of some shooters, of most shooters, and so trauma-based cognitive behavioral therapy is a potential approach which, when targeted towards the people who are at risk, can help them avoid falling into a life of violence and crime.
Adam, I see how reducing poverty could reduce violence.
Yes.
I'm not clear how reducing violence could reduce poverty.
I haven't read the book, but my guess would be that when violence is committed, it causes devastating effects to whomever it is committed to. So if it's burglary or armed robbery, that's clear. You're actually literally taking someone's property, which is causing a loss of revenue or something else. But the stress that would occur from any type of violence is going to be high. People might have to take time off work. People might have to seek medical care, which they have to pay out of pocket for, or even just, I think, the stress in the community. That'd be my guess.
Yeah. So I didn't really prepare and answer that question, Pat, but from what I recall from the book, there was a lot of issues of a community which has recurring violence in it. People live in a state of fear, which causes them to miss work, which causes them to have a reduced morale, which causes all sorts of problems. It reduces the property value. It causes businesses to leave an area. All sorts of effects that aren't always obvious until you really kind of think it out to its fullest conclusion. He does demonstrate that well, I found. That's part of his sort of take-home thing, right, is directly target the violence, and not that all the rest of the problems will solve themselves. And he very clearly states he is an advocate of reducing poverty. He thinks it's good, but if we're talking about violence, tackle the violence. And reduced poverty will be a side effect of that. Not that targeting violence is the best way to reduce poverty. There's going to be other ways to reduce poverty, obviously. So with trauma being a big problem in a lot of shooters' lives, the solution to that is trauma-based cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a method of therapy which helps patients identify faulty ways of thinking which are contributing to dangerous behaviors. So in this case, it's the faulty way of thinking which is causing you to resort to violence to solve your problems, or to think that the only way to protect yourself is to arm yourself and resort to violent acts. Now, this is the fourth book I've read somewhat recently where CBT was mentioned as being an evidence-based effective method of therapy. It certainly seems like a wise approach. That's probably something we could explore on the show as its own kind of thing. When it comes to policing, he puts a big focus on having fairness and legitimacy. So he says that basically mistrust in the police is at an all-time high in certain communities and many cities, which contributes to urban violence. So police brutality against Black Americans, which has led to the Black Lives Matter movement, leads to a lack of confidence in them amongst many that the police can protect them. Now, this leads to attitudes where people believe that the only way to protect themselves is to take matters into their own hands. People don't call the police when there's a crime. People have less confidence. There's all sorts of stats to show that in some affected communities where there's poor policing, it's reflected in the behavior of the people. Now, this can lead to violent confrontations to protect oneself or one's reputation, which is the thing one relies on to stay safe. Conversely, a community which has confidence that the police will treat their concerns fairly will be more likely to seek out the police to resolve a conflict or feel safer from violence, which in turn reduces the need for them to be violent, reduces violence, and everything gets great. So these positive or negative feedback loops can increase or decrease violence depending on how things go, and the perception of the police and how the police get that reputation can be a big factor there. So if the police don't fairly target violence, but arrest people for, say, drug possession, then the community won't feel that the police is looking out for their best interests. They will see them as oppressive and inadequate. So a police force which ignores robberies and murders while arresting people for non-violent crimes will not have the confidence of people in those communities. So he gave a lot of statistics about certain cities where there's high rates of urban violence that had very low rates of solving homicides or solving violent crimes. And obviously, the people don't feel that the police are going to be able to protect them if something happens in that case. So as such, the author suggests treating drugs as a health issue rather than a criminal issue and focusing on the violence itself. Now, for example, if a non-violent drug dealer is arrested, it won't do anything to reduce violence. But quite to the contrary, it could create chaos and a violent struggle as competition from other drug dealers fight for the business that person had on that turf or wherever that is. Similarly, a lot of gang activity is not actually violence, so focusing on violent gang activity and violent gang members is a better way to reduce violence rather than certain initiatives that just target gangs and try to stop gang activity itself. There's also a lot of focus on hotspots or micro places, very small places where a lot of crime happens. Darren, you mentioned something similar in a recent book review. Do you have any thoughts on that before I go on?
Yes, the discussion of Gladwell's recent book about talking to strangers and his brief exploration of, say, prostitutes in a particular domain, and when police were sent out in force to try to arrest Johns, they learned that the prostitutes, for the most part, didn't just walk 3 blocks over.
Yeah.
And it's the general idea that I think the greatest predictor of reducing crime is the belief and the likelihood you'll get caught. So it's not about, say, the severity of the prison sentence. It's like, how likely are you to get caught? And so if there are certain hotspots and then people come to believe that they are going to actually get caught and punished, at least in some way, that might actually reduce crime. So similar to your point, what you just said is that if people don't believe they're actually going to get punished for the thing that they should be punished for, crime will increase.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's the flip side to it, right? If people don't feel safe and they don't feel they're protected from violence, that can lead to violence. But if people also feel they can get away with it, yes, that can lead to more violence as well. So on the idea of hotspots and micro places, basically it's the statistical concept known as power law, which has a large number of something resulting from a small number. In this case, it's a lot of crime in very small places and from very small numbers of people. So for example, a lot of urban crime is in certain neighborhoods, but within those neighborhoods, most of the people in places are quite peaceful, are obeying the law, and crime is restricted to a very small number of places. And these can be very small, such as a street corner or a single building or a single apartment or something like that. And this kind of concentration makes targeted policing potentially quite cost effective as long as good data is used to inform where they're targeting, right? So if you want to, do a dragnet around a whole neighborhood, it's going to be very costly. And further, it's important that the right behavior in those areas is targeted, as random, indiscriminate stops is again likely to result in a loss of confidence in the police by the community. And as I mentioned, that can cause all sorts of terrible problems. And there's a bit on guns, which is nice. Gun control is a common topic, but one for which good evidence is not always that easy to find. Now, in this case, it is a book on urban violence, and when it comes to urban violence, such crime is usually not committed by lawful gun owners. So these are often guns that are borrowed from an acquaintance or another gang member or something like that. When it comes to urban violence, gun control is not necessarily going to reduce urban gun violence, but the enforcement of existing gun laws could do it. So gun buyback programs, for example, he looks at the statistics, they don't seem to be doing very well. Similarly, stopping the illegal gun trade, so the flow of guns to gangs, doesn't seem to do much either. That's not to say that new gun control laws are not potentially useful in saving lives. So he talks a bit about suicide with firearms, which are more likely than urban violence and usually committed with illegally obtained guns. So restrictions could certainly reduce suicide deaths, which if you're interested in just saving lives, that's a good approach. It's just not really the topic of the book. Domestic violence is also usually committed with illegally obtained guns, so laws restricting the purchase of guns by someone with a history of domestic violence could certainly reduce this. Domestic violence is less common than urban violence, but it's also a decently large problem. And the least common type of gun violence, which gets the most media attention, is mass shootings. The book gives a lot of data to support the idea that this is very uncommon, and it's something I've mentioned on the show before. And this is done to highlight how little attention is given to the greater cause of urban violence, considering that kills a lot more people. Now, in this case specifically, it mentions that mass shootings would likely be reduced in severity by laws reducing large magazine sizes and things like that. So it's another potential gun control thing. So it's not really a book about gun control, just because that doesn't seem to be too relevant to the issue, but there's a bit of a section that talks about it, which I thought was great. And statistics are also used to show that relative to mortality, gun violence is underfunded cause of death, thanks to groups like the NRA, which he isn't a big fan of. So it's not really a right-wing or a left-wing book. Thomas Abt worked for the Obama administration, and he does criticize Donald Trump as being a crime dinosaur who uses urban crime to divide people. But he says that the left get it wrong too. He states that progressives often want to focus on poverty reduction, criminal justice reform, and gun control, but they ignore focusing on the actual violence reduction to reduce violence. Now, with increased political polarization, this kind of makes the issue worse, and people really, don't want to compromise or don't want to do something that's anything similar to what their political opponents do. And I think it's pretty obvious that in the U.S., political polarization is becoming more and more of an issue as we go forward. So basically, he says that at the ends of the spectrum are oversimplifications, but evidence-based strategies don't oversimplify. And because of this, I wonder if the message in the book will be able to, reach a lot of readers, and if a lot of people will take it to heart. I certainly hope they do, but I think people are naturally hesitant towards some of the ideas that might be put forth. So it's really about the difference between working at improving an imperfect system or burning it to the ground and doing something completely different. Despite what we see in the media, the world is getting better in almost every measurable way, including violent crime and violent death. So if there are problems with policing, then those problems need to be addressed. Completely removing police from a neighborhood would no doubt result in massive amounts of violence by people who just don't feel safe and are taking the law into their own hands, and I don't think that's good for anyone in those communities. Addressing the problems, focusing on what works, and doing more of it is a good way forward, and that's kind of what this book is about. So there are many comparisons we could use for this, but our listeners might appreciate the comparison to medicine. There are a lot of problems with mainstream medicine, and these can be addressed by trying to fix the problems with that system instead of, say, scrapping medicine completely, supplementing it with homeopathy or some approach which is just not evidence-based. And there are a lot of people that basically suggest just that because of some problems that they've had with the medical system, right? I've talked a lot about what doesn't work, but this is also a book about what does work and what's promising and what he thinks would be a good approach. This usually involves collaboration between communities and police, identifying people and places at high risk, targeting them before they become violent, and for those that are violent, letting them know that it won't be tolerated. And this isn't magical. Often when people commit violent crimes, you hear that they were known to police. So this is stuff that people in the community understand is happening. So this can be done not with fear, but with trust, respect, fairness, and openness, which will convince the people that the police have their best interests in mind. And the data shows that this does seem to work. Obviously, some communities have a lot more work to do to get to a good place like that than others, but that's the idea. That's the goal here. I found it was a very good book. Thomas Abt approaches the topic using a very evidence-based approach, which I really appreciated. I hope that the suggestions in it can result in some real positive improvements in many of the communities in the United States in which urban violence is a big problem. And if these ideas are implemented, they could save a lot of lives and help a lot of people who are living in a state of fear to have happier, healthier lives.
Thanks, Adam. Sounds like a very interesting book. And thanks for joining us once again, listeners. I talked to you about vortices in Arizona and how they are supposedly new age magical mystical things, but really the landscape's just really pretty. And Cristina showed us that it seems like you probably could not survive almost any of the booby traps in Home Alone if they work in the first place. And Adam explored a book by Thomas Abt about sociology and crime that sounds pretty interesting. And just before we close out, we want to say thanks so much to all our listeners for all the support the entire year. This is our last show of the year, and we really appreciate you listening to us. Until next time, think better to act better.
Thanks, and peace out, Q-Woods.
Stay classy, not smart-assy. Love you, checkers.
Happy holidays, everyone.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast.